let's start here with the Camtasia editor, and I'll turn off my camera so that you have full view of the screen. So inside the editor, when you open up a brand new project or you start a new project from scratch, you're going to start here in the media bin. Well, a lot of people don't typically spend time by clicking on the next tab down, which is the library. We kind of teased this out at the very beginning of the webinar, and that is the Camtasia library. By default, you have installed the Camtasia 2021 library. Inside of that library are several folders. One that's called icons that has a lot of subfolders within it. You have one that's called intros, one that's called lower thirds, motion backgrounds, and music tracks. All these are pre-built inside of Camtasia for you to use right away. So if you want to create content and you don't have the time or already have the resources available to pull in an animated introduction or some sort of customized titling, you can do that right within Camtasia right at the beginning without doing any extra work. And they are royalty free, meaning they are built in as part of your license to Camtasia. You can put them out into the world in the videos that you create. You just can't claim them as your own. So enjoy, especially when it comes to music with new things like audio ducking. You already have the ability to add great content to your videos. What I want to talk about is the drop-down menu here at the top of the library. Now, it says Camtasia 2021, and unless you've already done some creation, when you click your drop-down menu, there's not going to be any user libraries, but I happen to have a bunch of these. So user libraries are libraries created by you, the content creator within Camtasia, and these can be built and customized based on your use case. For example, I have one here that's called Camtasia Tutorials. And inside this Camtasia Tutorials folder, I've added a bunch of stuff. In fact, if you've watched any of the tutorials on our website, you've probably seen intros that look like this. Animated with the crosshairs that drag across. We don't recreate those every single time. We have those available to us in our library as assets that we could drag onto projects at any time. If you've ever seen an arrow pointing to something very important in the user interface inside of Snagit or Camtasia, we have those arrows pre-built and colored so that we can utilize them inside of our different projects. And we have the colors matching the branding. All that is set to go. So what I would like to show first here is how to create your own custom library. It's actually pretty simple to do. Underneath that drop-down menu, you're going to see an option that's called Create New Library. And when you click on that option, you get first the ability to name it. So I'm going to call this Webinar Library, just so that it's easy for me to find. And then I can start either from an empty or blank state, or I can use any number of other libraries that I may already have created or using the default library available so that I can use it as a template. So it already comes pre-populated. For today's demonstration, for us to be able to use it here, so that I can click on a blank library and start with a brand new blank library over here on the left. So we have this blank webinar library that we are starting with, and we want to start populating it with some of our own content. Well, I can do something as simple as going into the annotations library and grabbing a call out. Maybe this purple call out is one that I want. And while I have it selected, I can open up the properties drawer on the right, the properties panel, and make some changes to it. So when you utilize a tool inside of Camtasia, these are just the default shapes and colors. You can make changes to them. Like if I didn't want the speech bubble, maybe I wanted this thought bubble style, and I wanted it to have a little bit of a longer tail and perhaps a different color. In fact, let's use a Camtasia green color. Once I've modified that and made my own style of this particular call out, while it's down on my tracks, I can right click on that item and choose to add it to my library. And when I do that, it gives me a menu to be able to rename it and add it to a library that I so choose. So in this case, I'm going to call this a Camtasia green callout because I changed the color over in my properties panel. And I'm going to add it to that brand new webinar library that I had made before. I have all the other ones I've created in the past, but for today's webinar, And for this content creation, I'm going to add it to my webinar library. And when I hit OK, that webinar library now has a brand new item in it. It's this green Camtasia callout. And now that it's there, I can use this as many times as I want across multiple projects. That's the biggest part about the library, is that you can use the content in there in more than one project. It doesn't have to be tied to the one project. As a matter of fact, Ryan, I'm going to show my library, the Camtasia tutorial library that we were using before. The analogy I like to use here is it's kind of like a pantry in your kitchen, where if you want to create some sort of recipe, you can go to your pantry and know in there, maybe you've got your rice or your balsamic vinegar or your brown sugar or whatever it is. You can go and grab those items from your pantry to make whatever kind of recipe you want. As long as the items are in your pantry, or in this case, inside your library, I can make whatever style of video that I want. So let's remove these from the canvas for right now. We'll clean up our project here. And I want to go into the existing Camtasia 2021 library and use a lower third that comes pre-built inside of Camtasia. And we're going to customize this a little bit more. The one I like to use most often is this one here. It's called Squares and Rectangles. So I'm going to right click and add this to my timeline. And when I add it to my timeline and bring the playhead over it, it is a pre-built, cool, animated lower third. Now, because it was built within Camtasia, it actually has some customizable features in it over in the properties panel. Everything from the title to the logo to the colors. So let's make a few changes. Let's change the title to, I don't know, my name. And we'll change the subtitle to Webinar Wednesday, which is what I like to call these webinar days because they happen to happen on Wednesdays. I can make changes to any aspect of these that I want, including the style of the font, the color, the size. Maybe I want it to be bold so that you can really read it. And maybe on the webinar Wednesday, I want it to be bold italic. So I've made subtle changes to this for my project styles. Maybe instead of red color there, I want to change it to the Camtasia orange color. And then maybe I won't do it right now, but I want to change out that logo. As soon as I make a change to an existing piece of content like that, and it's down here on my timeline, I can do the same thing I did before, which is right-clicking and adding that piece of media, that asset, to my library. So when I click Add to Library, I can name it whatever I want. Its default name is this Squares and Rectangles, but maybe I want to call it a Jason Lower Third, which is something that I might call it. And then I can change the library to that webinar library that we created already. And when I hit OK, I now have added a second asset to my library that's available for me to use. This comes in really helpful if I'm going to be creating a lot of similar style videos, maybe tutorials, maybe introduction videos, maybe product reviews. I want to be able to have that lower third easily added to my project. So if I'm down the timeline and I want to add that lower third again, I've got it available to me. It keeps all of its animations. And because it's still a customizable asset, I can make changes on the fly to the titling, the subtitles, and the colors. All those capabilities are now within Camtasia for me to be able to use on a regular basis because I've added them to my library. But there's a couple more things that I want to change, and that's the next part I want to talk about. And that is, some of you might have noticed whenever you grab a call out, you also have something above it called a theme. So there's a default color set that comes with Camtasia or with some of these pre-built assets. I changed the red to orange, and perhaps I wanted to change out the logo. But we do have the ability to apply something called themes. And themes are colorways and styles that are customized by you, by the end user, that you can use across multiple assets, callouts, text boxes, you name it. The easiest way to do this, to be honest, is to use that drop-down menu, and at the very bottom of it, there is an option that says Manage Themes. And when I click on that, I bring up something called the Theme Manager. And the Theme Manager is where I get to be pretty creative, or at least as creative as my company guidelines will allow me to be. For example, I have a series of themes that I've already built. We've got one for our Nomia product. We've got one for our Snagit product. I've got one for Camtasia, but I want to build a brand new theme. And here's how we do this. And this helps future Jason because I don't want to recreate these colors. I don't want to go look for them every time I'm making a video. I want them ready for me to use so that I can make my videos faster. So to make a brand new theme, I'm going to click on this plus button and I'm going to name it. So we'll call this the webinar theme. And when I click OK, I have a default set of purple colors and styles available to me. Now, if I am going to make this specific for a company branding, I can go through each one of these drop-down menus for the colors, and I can choose the color within the color wheel. I can apply the hex code if I know the hex code number, or the RGB code if I happen to have that color available to me as well. I actually have, Ryan, for our help here, I have one pulled up in Snagit, and I'm going to put that over here on my screen on the left-hand side, and we will put Camtasia on the right-hand side over here, or at least put it available so that I can bring up Snagit. There we go. So what I've got is my theme manager here, and I have, let's actually close that, and we'll shrink down the size of Camtasia so I can have both of them up at the same time. There we go. So all I've got here is on the right is that theme manager window that we were looking at before. And on the left, I happen to have an image pulled up in Snagit that has some generic Acme style brand guides, including these cool colors of this company called Data International. So while I'm building out this theme, I am not a designer and I don't memorize these color codes, including the hex codes or the RGB codes that happen to be presented on this image. So I'm going to use something inside of Camtasia that makes me even faster as well, and that is the color picker capability. So I'm going to leave the foreground the same. I'm going to leave that white because the foreground is going to be anything that pops on the top, but I want to change some of these background colors. So for background number one, I'm going to use the drop-down menu. I'm going to click on the color picker tool, which is this little eyedropper, and I'm just going to drag it over here to one of my primary colors or the secondary colors in this brand styles. And as I hover over them, you'll see over on the right, there is a preview of what they look like in the actual theme that I'm developing. I really like this like orange style color, so I'm going to click on that, and that now applies that color to this background location. I can do the same with any of the other colors. I think what looks good there? I think we're going to go with this teal color, and then for the accent color, instead of this light purple, we're going to use the purple that's in the theme over here. So I've now created a customized theme inside of Camtasia based on colors from this colorway. Then I can apply a specific font. If I have a font that my company uses, let's see, for this one, it says Helvetica or Futura. So let's pull up the drop-down menu of fonts. So the font list that I have here is going to be the fonts associated with the ones installed on my computer. So I have a few installed here on my computer. I might not, for say, have the ones that they want. So I'm going to pick my own from my master list here. I think I'm going to choose, I think I have one called Roboto that I really, really love. So we'll go down to the R's here. We're going to call it Roboto Black. And then if I want a secondary font, I can add that as well. So thanks, Snagit. We're going to get you out of the way. We're going to move this back to the primary part of what we're talking about. So I've applied a colorway to my theme. I've applied a font, and I can also apply a logo. So when you click on the logo option here in the theme, you have an option here to browse for a logo. So if you have a lower third, in this case, that has a logo associated with it or a spot for a logo, you can add it. In the default one, it keeps the Camtasia logo, but if you're not doing something for TechSmith or for Camtasia, you don't happen to need that one. So for me, I'm going to browse on my system for a logo, and I know inside of my documents folder, I have one that's avatars of myself. Yep, that's a thing. So I'm going to grab this particular TechSmith avatar of me and click open, and that's going to apply that particular logo, that particular avatar to this theme. So I've added colors, my own font, my own logo to create my own theme that we named Webinar Theme. And when I click Save, I now have in my drop-down menu here at the top of the themes, a theme called Webinar Theme that we created. And when I click on that, it automatically changes the icons the colors, and the font to match that theming. As a matter of fact, if we add that call out that we had before with the Camtasia green, if I choose the webinar theme for that, it'll apply it based on the associated colors built into that particular theme. So now, no matter what project I'm in, I could go into the Camtasia library. I could grab an additional lower third, like let's grab this sliding boxes one. We'll move the playhead down here. We'll grab the sliding boxes lower third, which has its own set of animations and colors. I can click on the theme and choose the webinar theme that I built before. And now all of its animations stay in place, but all the colors and fonts and styles match exactly what I chose when I built my theme out. Ryan, I've been going nonstop here for like 20 minutes. I'm going to take a quick drink of water and find out, have there been any questions that might have come in from any of our attendees that the team wanted to pass along that I might be able to answer based on the things we've talked about so far, which is creating or discovering that there is a built-in Camtasia 2021 library with royalty-free assets, the creation of your own web library. In this case, we created a webinar library, and then adding things to it from your timeline, including the creation of a custom theme to match your desired outcomes.
Yep, sounds good. We do have several questions coming in around what you've covered so far. So while you are getting your drink, I will talk slowly to ask the first question, which is going to be, April had asked, so you can go across two separate applications to pick a color for themes. So, because you had pulled that up in Snagit and had it on your screen, but typically you can pick any color that you can, that's visible on your computer monitor, correct?
Yeah. So let's go back into, excuse me. Once you're actually have a theme created, there is an option in the file drop-down menu here called Manage Themes. So you can go into those themes at any point. If I'm here in the webinar theme and I wanted to change, say that that orange color, I can modify it however I want. I can add that hex code or RGB code. I can go through the entire color wheel as it is available to me. I don't have to use another program, but as long as I have this color picker, if it's available to me on my screen, I can grab it. As a matter of fact, on the other screen, we have a Google Doc open. If anybody's ever used Google Docs, I'm going to go over and hover over the share button. I know you can't see this, but this is the blue share color of the share. Well, let's just grab it. That share button there is the color I just dragged the color picker over. I use the color picker because I don't necessarily know the RGB codes or the hex codes, but I know it's the color I want. This is great because if you work for a company that's got a customer-facing web page, there's a good chance your colors are there. And if you don't have access to your marketing department, you can acquire your company's colors to make sure that you're on brand for those content creation pieces.
Nice. Thanks for showing that. Christy, and I believe a couple other people were asking, how do I make the thumbnails bigger in the library so that they can see? Is there a way to change the view in your library so that you can see things a little bit larger?
Oh, over here in this library?
Yes. Yep.
So in the media bin, we have capabilities to make things larger. In the library, we don't have that capability that I've ever utilized. However, the thing that doesn't happen in the library is the ability to search within it. So if you've named it something specific, you can find those things right away. As far as being able to resize things in the library, that's not a function we have as of yet, but the team is here and listening. So it's possible that we could add that to our short wish list. So thanks.
If you double click an item, does it open up in a separate window?
It opens up in a preview window, so you're able to see what it is right away.
Okay. Yep.
So you can definitely, especially if they're animations, they'll open up in a window like this, so you can see what they look like as they animate in or as they have a finished state. You can do that as well.
Perfect. All right. So a couple other people were asking about the library. So if you, how can you share your library? Are you going to show this a little bit later, or do you want to talk about if you create a custom library that you want to share with your colleagues, or maybe you're moving it to another computer?
Let's talk about that now. That's a great question. I was going to bring it up later, but it's a good point to talk about this because for my libraries that I have already created, including the Snagit one or the Camtasia tutorials one, we spend a lot of time on these. And there are many members of our team that work on the tutorials. Ryan, you do, myself, our teammate Chandra, we all work on tutorials. So it's best to have the same library assets for everybody working on the same styles of projects, right? That way it maintains consistency. We're on brand. There's different ways you can share library assets with people. For example, if I want everyone using this orange arrow, I can right click on it and choose to export that asset. So that just exports that arrow out as what's called a libzip or library zip file. And once people share that with someone else that has Camtasia, they would go into the library menu itself, the drop down here, and they could go to manage library to import a zipped library, which would import that individual piece. You can also export folders inside the libraries, or even easier, you can export the whole library itself. So Ryan, if I wanted you to have this entire Camtasia tutorials library with all the assets that I had built, I can go to that same managed library and choose to export that library, which would take all the pieces inside of that library, zip them up into a libzip or library zip asset file. Then you would come in and import it into your instance of Camtasia. All of that capability of exporting things within the library is also available underneath the file export package option, where you can actually put lots of things together, including the libraries you created. Like there's that webinar library, including the themes you created. Like, hey, we just created this webinar theme. I could give you the theme and the library, or multiple themes and multiple libraries, and I could share those with you as well, including what we're going to talk about here in just a little bit, which is templates. You can share those things outside of Camtasia, especially with your teammates, so that you breed consistency across your tools.
Whew, you answered a lot right there. Thank you.
Cool.
That answered a lot. I got one more library type question. This one's a tricky one for me, at least. When Jason had asked, when saving an element to the library, it showed an option for canvas size versus visible size. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about the difference there?
I sure can. So I almost always use the canvas size. The canvas size is the dimensions of that asset will match the current canvas dimensions. So when I choose call out, this is going to come on when I add that back to a project here. So let's go back into the webinar library. We'll bring this call out in. It's going to match the entire dimension of the particular canvas that you were already using. If you were to choose to add the library and chose use the visible size, what that's going to do is the dimensions of that asset are going to be bound by the visual elements in the asset, which means it might not match the canvas size, but you should be able to resize it as needed. I almost always use the canvas size because that brings it in as a larger piece. I can resize it as needed, and or I can crop it to make it fit the project that I'm using. So when in doubt, my recommendation is to choose the canvas size, which is the option by default, but you can definitely experiment with using the visible size as well.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. We'll let you keep going, and we'll gather more questions for you.
Sure. And I'm going to say thanks to Dro in the support, because he definitely wrote that up for me, and I absolutely utilize that. So thanks, Dro. Appreciate it, man. You're cool. All right. So we talked about, Ryan, we talked about creating a library. We've now talked about exporting that library. We've talked about utilizing assets that were already in the Camtasia 2021 library to both customize and then add to your library to be able to use across multiple projects. We also talked about the creation of themes, which allows you to stay on brand with coloring, fonts, and icons as well. And those all help me make videos faster, right? I can go to the well. I can go into my webinar library and grab that lower third whenever I need it. There's that lower third just in the place we left it when we had added it to our library early on. Let's make videos even faster. And I think the next thing I wanted to talk about with everyone, and I'm double checking my notes because that's fair, is the idea of utilizing templates inside of Camtasia. So templates were added a few versions back, and not a lot of people utilize these, Ryan. So let's go to a new project. We're not going to worry about saving this. A template is exactly that. It is creating a project file that has things in place so you can quickly make videos later on based on a template. We actually have pre-built templates, at least one. If you go to the File menu and choose File, New Project from Template, you get this. This is a template manager screen, and a template option is also available in that welcome window, Whenever you launch Camtasia for the first time, where you can start a new project, open an existing project, start a recording, one of those options is to utilize a template. And the one you will have by default, you'll either have a Camtasia 2020 if you're using Camtasia 2020 or a Camtasia 2021 default template. Let's take a look at what a template looks like. So if we click on that template, it's going to launch Camtasia with a template built into place. And what the template is there are already assets in the media bin and assets down on the timeline. In this particular case, you have an animated introduction. Just dragging the playhead here. That once you select it, of course, is customizable over in the properties panel. You already have an outro, which is over here at the end of the timeline. Also, when selected, can be animated or changed based on your customization. But the thing in my mind that makes it a template is the inclusion of this piece of media sitting here in the middle. This is called a placeholder. And that's really what it is holding the place for whatever type of media that you might want to put in later on. When you place a placeholder on the timeline, which is easily done by using the hotkey letter P as in Paul, or P for placeholder. In fact, when I click it, you'll see that a placeholder has been added. It is just a blank piece of media that's ready for you to adjust as needed. So you can make changes to it based on its duration that's on the timeline. You can apply transitions to it. You can add notes to it. In fact, let's delete this one. There is notes associated with this placeholder that's in this existing template. Everything from being renamed, because when you select it, you can change its title. This one says screen video recording here. And then there are notes for whoever is going to make a video based on this template, which is great because it could be me in 6 months where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to make another video like that one I made. I'm going to utilize that template so it breeds consistency. And the note here says, replace this clip with a screen recording, record your screen using the red record button, and then drag and drop it on this clip to replace it. You know what this is like, Ryan? This is like if you decorate for the holidays and you get out a set of lights and you take the time when you put them away to wrap them up correctly so that you, the next year, get out those lights or those decorations, they're already ready to go. Same principle inside of Camtasia. I want to have a template ready for me so that when I come back to this video or this style of video, whether it's tomorrow, next week, next month, or even next year, that it's ready with good notes available for me to be able to create this content. So for example, let's use this template to make a video. And in this case, we're going to click on the intro. We're going to call this one, let's move it right to where the title is so we can see it. We're going to call this one, Find Our Tutorials. And then on the subtext, it's going to be www.techsmith.com. Eventually, I want to stop typing www. I think I'm just almost to that point, right? So I've customized it where it says Find Our Tutorials, techsmith.com. And then I'm going to customize the where it says, thanks for watching. And then I'm going to reintroduce the website, techsmith.com. So I've got my intro. I've got my outro. And now I just need to fill in that middle. So I can do one of a couple of things here. I can go hit the red record button and go capture that content so that it's ready to go. But maybe I'm making a video where someone else has created that content, or I've already recorded this in a previous time. I can grab that content. In fact, I did. If I go to my library and I go to the my Vlad library, I have this piece of media here, this Find Tutorials. I already have this recording made. So all I need to do is click, drag it down onto that placeholder right on top of it. And when it turns green, I let go and choose Ripple Replace, which is going to replace the placeholder with my recording. I'll then make sure that it's sized appropriately so it fits the screen. And now I've already, just like that, created a video. So let's play this back here for a couple seconds. We get our animated introduction. Looks nice and clean. Then it's going to have a transition on it. It's easy to find tutorials on the TechSmith website. Let me show you how. Go to techsmith.com in your favorite web browser. So I've got this content here. I can still edit it if I want. I can add zooms and pans and animations to it. But I've now created a piece of video based on a template in an existing recording that took me all of, I don't know, a minute or less. And that's because I was kind of playing around because I had a template ready to go. Now, there's lots of things you can do with templates, and I'm going to show you a couple more things before we take some more questions. So let's go back to File. Let's go to Manage Templates, which is going to bring up that template manager. You are going to have one template installed by default, and it's going to be either your Camtasia 2020 or Camtasia 2021 default template. You can download more templates with a button up here in the right-hand corner, which is going to open up library.techsmith.com, which is going to be the asset library for content. This is a paid service. However, if you go over to the left and toggle off premium and hit apply, you can find, was it 20? Yeah, 20 free templates that can be utilized inside of Camtasia right away. And they've all got different titles based on what they're designed for. But of course, because it's a template and because it's customizable inside of Camtasia, you can make changes however you want. In fact, if I wanted to go with how do I DIY this, I can hover over this training step-by-step template, and I can click the Camtasia button, and I'll say open in Camtasia 2021, and it will open that template and add it to my template manager right here inside of Camtasia so that I could double click on that one. We won't save the one we just worked on. And then it will open up this project inside of Camtasia, and I'll be able to utilize that template in my video. And if you'll notice, this one has a lot going on. It's got music, it's got placeholders, it's got multiple pieces of media, including text overlays where you can click on them and make changes based on what was left customizable. You can do a lot with inside of existing templates. But more often than not, you might want to create your own, which is what we've done. Ryan actually has one that we were using for projects earlier this year. So if I go back to my managed templates, he has one here that's called the Snagit Quick Tip videos. And these are ones that he built so that he could make a consistent style of video. And I'm going to open the template here real quick to show what this looks like on the timeline, where there's already grouped animations. There's a placeholder for music. There's these step 1, step 2 sort of call outs that can be customized over here in the properties panel, and different placeholders that you can utilize. In fact, these are the videos that if you go to techsmith.com and you pull up our tutorial page underneath the support menu, and you go to Camtasia, all of these styles of videos, especially the Camtasia ones, if you scroll down, there are a series of featured videos that were all built utilizing templates inside of Camtasia so that they have a consistent look and feel. So let's build our own.
Can I ask you a quick question, Jason, before you jump into building your own?
Sure.
So there's been a lot of questions around the placeholder, and maybe this is kind of leading you into your demoing, but a lot of people are saying, so what if my video is 5 minutes long, but the placeholder is only 2 minutes long? And then there was also the questions around what's that ripple replace mean and all that. So maybe when you're building your one here, you can kind of really focus on those couple of questions.
Let's do a cooking show style, Ryan. Let's open up one that we have here. If we have a secondary YouTube channel called TechSmith Support, and on that support YouTube channel, we have a lot of videos that look like this. There's an introduction. In fact, there's a music that goes with it. That says Camtasia and title. There's a placeholder piece of media here. And then there's an outro that tells you where to learn more about our products. So the question is the placeholder length, right? As well as what is ripple replace. Let's talk about both of those. So the placeholders themselves are a static piece of media. I just added one to my timeline by hitting the P button. It can be any length you want. As a matter of fact, I can make this placeholder there. Now it's 7 minutes long. It's literally a blank piece of media that's awaiting your replacement. It's designed for you to put something in its place. So if we have a piece of media, in fact, this placeholder is what? It's about 5 seconds, about a minute long. This is a minute long placeholder. If I go back to my library and I grab that tutorial recording and I just drag it onto the timeline and don't replace that piece of media, I have it sitting on its own, you'll notice that it is significantly shorter than the placeholder that I have on the screen right now. Okay. What I want to do is I want to bring it down into that placeholder area by using something called Ripple Replace. And to do that, you click on it, you drag it onto the placeholder until it turns green, and you'll see the outline is green there. And when I let go of my mouse, I get this option called Ripple Replace. What it's going to do with a Ripple Replace is this media that I'm dragging onto the placeholder is going to replace it so that the placeholder is gone and my media is there. And the ripple option of that, the Ripple Replace, what it's going to do is it's going to take everything to the right of that placeholder, which in this case is our outro and this black shape for the end slides for YouTube. And it's going to ripple move or delete all this blank space that would be here normally, so that all the material at the end snaps to the end of the recording. So if I hit Ripple Replace, it replaces that placeholder, and it took all that content that was down here towards the right, and it closed that gap. Because if it didn't close that gap, you're going to have this blank space. And that's not really helpful when you're creating videos, to have those blank spaces. The other way I could correct that is if I did do a placeholder where I didn't Ripple Replace, if I just slipped it into place and there was this spot there that was open, we do have something inside of Camtasia called magnetizing tracks. And that is over here on the left where it's the track name is. There is a magnet icon. If I click on that, it adds these chevrons to the track and it creates a magnetization, so that if I drag something down onto the timeline right where it's magnetized, it's going to snap it to the left no matter what. So if I pull my recording out of the way, it snapped everything down here to the left and closed those gaps. So that's what helps with magnetization and placeholders. All the placeholders typically have magnetization in place if there are gaps to be closed. So that hopefully answers that question, Ryan. What else can we answer for our attendees? I think were you going to go ahead and build one from scratch, or you?
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Why
don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to create a new project. So we have a blank canvas to start with, and I'm going to build a template based on content that we've not only just built, but that we've got available to us inside of the Camtasia pre-built library. So let's start with the 2021 library. And we're going to go to an intro, and we'll grab my favorite one, the state intro. We're going to drag it down here onto my timeline. So I now have an animated introduction that's it's this one that's called state. I'm going to apply my own theme that we created, this webinar theme. So I now have taken a pre-built existing intro, customized it for my use. I'm going to help myself out by saying, instead of your text here, I'll say title of video. And then I'll put this under and call this one project name. So whenever someone comes into this, they're going to know, oops, I need to replace title of video and whatever project this is for. So maybe this is how to find tutorials, TechSmith website. Okay, I have that built in. For me, I like to use the same intro as my outro. So I'm going to do a copy, right click on this piece of media, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put my playhead down here, and I'm going to paste that same one into place so that I have the same intro and outro available to me. That way I have it set to go so that there's consistency. I don't have to worry about it, except in this time, instead of title of video, I'm going to put thanks for watching. And then I'm going to build this one out to say techsmith.com. So typically I shouldn't have to do anything with that outro. It's already built in. Now I'm going to add a placeholder here in the middle somewhere. I'm going to use the hotkey of the letter P, or you can go into the edit menu at the top and choose add placeholder, which also shows that hotkey. And when I click on that, I have a placeholder that's been added to my timeline. I can move it down. I can resize it. I'm just going to make it maybe a 50-second one or so. I'm going to close my gaps by hitting the magnetize button. And to help myself even more, I'm going to click on that placeholder, and I'm going to do some notes for future Jason or future teammate, whoever's creating content based on this template. So when the placeholder is selected, I can go into the upper right-hand corner here, the properties panel, and I can rename that placeholder. Let's call this screen video, because that's what kind of videos we're going to be making. And when I hit the notes, this is just notes for me that are going to show up or whoever's creating it. I'm going to say, make sure your recording dimensions match your project. That's just a helpful one to know that if I'm using a 720p project, that my recording should be at least 720p, if not greater. That can be sized down. Now, I want you to notice as soon as I added notes to the properties of that placeholder, this little icon shows up here in the right-hand side of the properties panel. That just is a quick visual representation for whoever's creating this content that, hey, there's some notes. Let's take a look over here on the notes. When I'm ready, anything I add to this particular template is going to be kept. So maybe I want a specific transition. In this case, I do. If I go to my favorites menu, I am really loving this cascading squares this transition. I just really think it's clean. I think it's modern. I think it's fun. So I'm going to click and drag that down onto the placeholder as well, because the placeholder itself acts like a piece of media. So it will keep those transitions or any sort of properties that I add to it available to me, so that when I drag a new piece of media in here, it'll keep those properties as well, including the transition, the sizing, and whatnot. I can also help myself by adding a placeholder. So we'll do the letter P here. And I'm going to add a placeholder to the entire length of this video. So I'll match the length of the animation. And I'm going to call this one music. Pick a song. And for me, because it's a piece of media, it is now blocking everything on my screen because it's a visual piece of media. So if I drag it out of the way, there's my intro. So for me, I'm just going to give myself notes and I'm going to hide that track, but it's still here on the timeline, so that when I come back in, I'm going to be like, hey, I can add a piece of music to that. And when I do a ripple replace, because it's not visual, the music will replace that placeholder. And now I'll have it available to me in my next video. So when I get a project to the state where I'm ready for it to be a template, it's easy to add it to my template manager. First, this is a pro tip. Wherever the playhead lands, whatever's showing in your canvas. So in this case, I'm going to have it right here. So it shows this visual. When I create this as a template, when I save it as a template, this is going to be the thumbnail that's created. So pro tip is to always put your playhead where you want the thumbnail to be. Then go to File, Save Project as Template. And when I do that, I get a new template dialog here with a template name. We'll call this webinar template for today. And when I hit OK, it tells me that the template file has been saved. I hit OK. And now whenever someone goes into the template manager or to create a new template or a new project from template, that one is here and available. Now, when you're in the template manager itself, you can do a few things like deleting it, renaming it. You can share that template out into the world by exporting the template itself. Or like we showed a little earlier, if you go to the file menu, choose export and choose package, you can choose to add that particular template to the package you might share with someone. There we go. Yeah,
that's
right.
awesome.
We created a template. There we go.
That's really cool. And you mentioned a pro tip, and I've done this so many times. I think it's worth saying it again. Where you put your cursor right there, what's showing on the screen is what's going to be that thumbnail in the template manager. So for example, I do this all the time. I have my placeholder or my playhead all the way back to 0, or
it's black,
and it's black. Yep. And if I go ahead and if you could go up to say File, Save as a Template.
Yep.
And just say
for Ryan.
And now if you go into your template manager, this is what I would always see. I would see just this blank one. And I'd have to be like, oh man, delete it, go back, move my playhead to the spot where I want that thumbnail to show up, so it gives me that visual. So I think, that's definitely a good tip for people.
I've definitely done that many times. So I always try and remember to not only put my playhead at a spot where it's viable, but then have it be something helpful for me. For example, when we created these templates for the support videos, I put it in where I could see the product name, and even the color clues me in real quick. So if I don't read it, oh, that's Audiate, that's purple, I know that's it, or that's Camtasia, I know it's available to me. absolutely helpful thing to put your playhead where you want that thumbnail to be. Yep.
Awesome. And I just saw another question that I think is timely. You had put the music track on track 2 and then you hit it with that button. Could you also put that on track 1 so it's underneath everything and then it could not have to be invisible?
Sure. So if I do that, if I insert a track, let's say a track below, so I've created a brand new track 1. If I, in this case, move that placeholder down, because aspects of my intro are based on the color of the canvas, they are see-through, so to speak. So I would still see that template placeholder behind it. So that's why I, more often than not, I do put it on track 1, but when I'm making a template, I hide it because the color of this intro in this particular one is dependent on the canvas color. So if I were to change the canvas color from black to, let's say, white, which is going to bleed out that text, let's change it to orange, even though that's garish. Sorry, everybody. That if I were to unhide that placeholder, it's still sitting as a piece of media being seen through because these layers of this intro are layered on top of the canvas. That's the reason why I typically add the music track, regardless on what track it is, but then I hide it so that it's visually there so I can see it as the content creator, but it's not disrupting the visual of my particular project.
That's an excellent tip. I did not even realize that placeholder bleeds through. So
Yep. It's this one in particular. If you were to use, Ryan, if we went into the library and instead of using an animated introduction, or I use an introduction that has solid color like this one does, then that wouldn't be a problem. I just get in the habit of hiding that music track regardless because I kind of like the way it looks nice and clean. And then I can add music to it later on without worrying about it because music is not a visual medium. So it will automatically do that ripple replace. And I don't have to worry about it disrupting any of the visuals that I've created.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great. So along the lines of these, the templates and the libraries and stuff that you've created, I want to ask you this question. I don't know if it's possible or not, but Yvette asked, can Jason share with us his branding library or Camtasia tutorial library with everybody so that they can use it and not have to start from scratch and change colors for arrows and stuff like that?
So someone's asking, if I would be willing to share our corporate branding with them.
I think so. I think that's the question.
That's a great question. I will have to make sure that that's okay. I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't be. This is a publicly available color. The colors are ones you would find in our products. So Ryan, let's make a note to ask that. And if we can, Yvette, we will try and attach that to or add a link to that to the email that you'll get within the next 24 hours, including the recording of today's session. We'll see if we can. If we can, we will. Otherwise, we might be able to find the link to the branding guidelines and then allow you to create your own, right? Because even though I have these built in for our tutorials, which is what these are for, you might not be using an arrow. You might not use this call out. You might not use the sketch motion, but you definitely should be able to have access to the colors. So we'll figure that out and see if we can share that out.
Great. And again, it's super easy to make their own start from scratch, new library, find an arrow that you like, right click, send it to that library, and so forth. So
if we add that arrows here, and if I wanted to be the Camtasia green, for example, if I use the drop-down menu in the color picker, the Camtasia green is sitting here on the export menu. I can literally drag my color picker eyedropper on there. Now it's green. And because it's green, I can right click on it. Let's move the playhead down here. I can right click down here on the green one that's on my timeline, right click, add it to my library. I've got a Camtasia green arrow just like that.
Very good. One other question I saw earlier about the library. Can you make, there are folders in there. Can you create your own folders and organize your libraries yourself?
Yeah. Absolutely. This is how I do it quite often. If I go into my own personal library, if I right click on the area below where the content is itself and choose new folder, I can add that here. And maybe I want to add this TSC sounds, which is part of what I've got in my folder here. Once I have that folder, then I can click and multi-select and drag things into those folders as needed. A great way to organize your library. My libraries tend to get out of control because I add a lot of stuff to a lot of different libraries. So this is another pro tip. If your library dropdown becomes a little bit unwieldy, which mine was about a week ago before I was getting ready for today's webinar, I do tend to right click on them or choose manage library and export individual libraries out and just store them on an external drive or a cloud storage device so that I have them available to me, because to bring them back in, it's as easy as going to file, library, import zipped library, and then I can bring them back in based on the project that I have at hand. Ryan, I do want to address a question that did come up through multiple people. People are concerned, or a question, if they upgrade Camtasia, right? If they go from Camtasia 2019 to 2020 or 2020 to 2021, does the content in your library, so your saved existing custom libraries, do they get migrated? And the answer is yes. There is a box that says, do you want to keep your files or not? Or if you want to make sure that it says to keep your content, it will migrate in and bring it in. I've updated many a time and all of my libraries come in. But as a secondary thing, I do quite often go into the file menu, choose export package, and I grab all of my libraries and just have a backup. That's just for me. I always like having a backup of all my content just in case.
Nice.
Right. We're at the end of time. Actually, we're at where we want. Is there other questions that might have come in or things that are lingering out there that I might be able to do? I want to make sure that people know if they're in their libraries, they can always download more assets. There are a lot of free options, not only of intros, lower thirds on that library, asset library website, which is library.techsmith.com. You can do all of that in there. I am constantly adding customized pieces to my library because I might need it as a one-off, or I might decide I need it later on. So happy to answer any more questions that we have coming in.
All right. We're going to finish with a question from Mike. He says, when I use music from the TSC library, do I need to give credit when I publish it to YouTube or other sites?
The answer to that is no, you should not have to do that. So the library you're referring to in Camtasia 2021 built-in one, there is music tracks that are here. These have all been cleared, which means when YouTube does its auto scrubbing to check for content that's been restricted or any of that sort of thing, these should all be cleared. If for some odd reason it comes up as not cleared, we do have a process to help with that, but these should all be cleared for use. You just can't claim them as your own. You can't say, I wrote this great song called Firefly. You do not have to cite it in your description. You're good to go.
Great. Thank you for answering that.
Sure.
All right. So I think if we pull up the final slide, and I just want to also mention, this is a lot of what Jason showed today are kind of like hidden features. A lot of times you don't go into the file menu and say, what's this, create a template type thing. You know, I'm used to just going into Camtasia, hitting the record button, creating a video from scratch. So hopefully this kind of opened your eyes to some other really powerful features inside of Camtasia that can maybe even help you streamline and create consistent, fast videos. So good job, Jason, with sharing all of your knowledge today.
Sure. And thanks to you and the team for being. A lot of questions came in, a lot of questions. I hope we were able to get to yours.
Yes. So with that, just a quick reminder, you'll get the recording of this session tomorrow. So about 24 hours from now, look for an email from TechSmith where you will get the recording. You can go back and review it. There'll be some links to some other resources. And a final message, when you exit this Zoom webinar, you'll get prompted for a short survey. If you wouldn't mind spending a minute to just let us know what you liked, what we can do better, as well as if you have any requests for maybe topics that you'd like to see us offer in the future. We would love to hear that too. So thank you all for your time. I know you gave up an hour of your day to spend with us, and we really appreciate it. Jason, thank you. Our support group who is answering hundreds of questions. Thank you for that. Jason, I'll let you wrap it up.
No, thanks to everyone. Thanks for attending, for taking the time. Thanks for filling out that survey, because it helps us create brand new content. In fact, this webinar came from those questions and ideas. So everybody, wherever you are, enjoy the balance of your day. Thanks for being a part of this.